For decades, the world ran on one currency, and almost no one questioned it. But today, something subtle is changing in global trade, quietly, strategically. Countries are not abandoning the dollar. They are reducing their dependence on it. This is the global money shift, and it's already reshaping the world economy. It powered global trade, shaped financial markets across continents, and became the backbone of modern international commerce. After World War II, the United States emerged in a unique position, becoming the world's economic anchor almost overnight. Its factories were untouched, its economy was expanding rapidly, and its financial institutions were widely trusted. Over time, the dollar became the center of global trade, reserve holdings, and nearly every major financial transaction. Oil was priced in dollars, international contracts were settled in dollars, and global trade flowed through the same system. For decades, this system worked smoothly because countries around the world trusted it. But no global system, no matter how powerful, remains unchanged forever. Slowly and quietly, pressure began to build beneath the surface of the global financial system. One major source of that pressure was the steady rise of U.S. government debt. Year after year, budget deficits stopped being temporary and slowly became a permanent feature. As long as global trust remained strong, this growing debt appeared manageable. The real concern emerged when financial power began to transform into a political tool. Sanctions expanded across borders, and foreign assets were suddenly frozen within the system. For some countries, the economic damage was immediate and deeply painful. For everyone else watching from the sidelines, these actions sent a clear and lasting warning. They began asking a difficult question about the system they all depended on. If financial power could be used as a weapon once, could it be used again? At the same time, trade conflicts were making global commerce far less predictable. At the same time, trade conflicts were making global commerce far less predictable. Tariffs raised costs, slowed production, and disrupted long-established supply chains. Even longtime allies of the United States began feeling the economic pressure. Businesses delayed investment decisions, waiting for stability that never fully arrived. Long-term planning became harder in a system that kept changing direction. So instead of open confrontation, countries quietly chose a more cautious path. They began diversifying their trade relationships across multiple partners. They also diversified how they stored wealth and managed financial exposure. This was not a rejection of the US dollar, but a deliberate effort to reduce risk. These changes were slow, quiet, and carefully calculated over time. And one country that clearly reflects this strategic shift is Canada. For decades, Canada's economy was closely intertwined with that of the United States. Energy exports, manufacturing supply chains, and the auto industry tied the two countries together. This relationship brought stability, but it also created long-term dependence. When trade uncertainty increased, that dependence became a vulnerability. Tariffs raised costs for Canadian businesses and complicated long-term planning. Investment slowed as companies waited for clearer and more stable trade rules. So Canada began asking a practical question about its economic future. How could the country reduce risk without sacrificing growth? The answer was diversification, not separation from existing partners. China quickly emerged as one of the most important alternative trade partners. China offered scale, manufacturing capacity, and access to a massive market. For Canada, this decision was economic, not ideological. This shift became most visible in one rapidly growing sector: the electric vehicle industry. Electric vehicles are not just about transportation, but about industrial power and future competitiveness. Electric vehicles are reshaping not only transport, but the balance of industrial power worldwide. China invested early and heavily across the entire electric vehicle supply chain. That investment covered raw materials, batteries, and large-scale vehicle production. As a result, Chinese manufacturers achieved lower costs and faster innovation. For countries entering the EV transition later, this cost advantage became critical. Canada saw EVs as a chance to move up the industrial value chain. Building such an ecosystem entirely on its own would have taken many years. And in global competition, time is often the most expensive resource. So partnering with established leaders offered a faster path forward. As Chinese electric vehicles entered global markets, competition intensified. Prices fell, technology improved, and consumers gained more affordable options. For American automakers, this shift created serious competitive pressure. Higher production costs made it difficult to compete purely on price. This was not a political dispute, but a market-driven reality. And as markets shifted, trade flows and currency choices began to shift as well. As trade routes evolved, the way payments were settled began to evolve as well. More international transactions started taking place without relying on the US dollar. This shift was not sudden, and it was not confrontational. It was driven by cost efficiency, risk reduction, and practical decision-making. Small choices, repeated consistently, began reshaping the global financial system. This trend is often described as de-dollarization, though the term can be misleading. The US dollar remains powerful, but it is no longer the automatic default. Automatic demand was once the source of its unmatched strength. China played a key role by developing alternative financial infrastructure. Currency swap agreements offered liquidity during periods of financial stress. These mechanisms did not replace existing systems, but operated alongside them. Having multiple options reduced vulnerability for participating countries. Central banks also adjusted how they stored national reserves. Gold reserves increased steadily across many economies. Gold offered a store of value that could not be frozen or politically restricted. These decisions were not loud or dramatic, but they were deeply strategic. For the United States, this gradual shift created a new economic reality. The country remains powerful, but its influence now faces growing competition. In this environment, influence can no longer be assumed. It must be maintained. Markets respond to consistency, stability, and predictable policy. Trust, once weakened, takes time and effort to rebuild. Looking ahead, the global economy is unlikely to return to a single center of power. Instead, a multi-currency world is quietly taking shape. This does not signal chaos, but a redistribution of economic balance. Risk is spread more widely, and shocks are absorbed more evenly. For many countries, flexibility has become more valuable than dominance. The era of unquestioned financial dominance is slowly coming to an end, not through collapse, but through choice and adaptation. Countries are choosing resilience, diversification, and long-term stability. And those choices are now shaping the future of global trade and finance.